I said earlier, you've been called back by the company to give your full presentation for a second visit. We are asking, and they're asking for you to only speak about the ethical aspect of the problem and to explain why your solution successfully handles any ethical issues. You're going to have exactly 10 minutes and there will be no Q&A, unlike the 25-minute section. We had some dialogue afterwards. No Q&A this time. And you may not use slides or videos. And you probably don't want to have more than 2 or 3 members from the team present in this section for 10 minutes. Any questions at all? Okay, I'm seeing about 46 after the hour here. And so if you're ready, I'll start the clock, okay? I think we're ready. We'll go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you. Hello, EU Commission. We are coming to talk to you about the ethical implications of the chocolate industry. The problem that we've presented is labor rights and child labor in the cacao industry. And our solution is EU policies for mandatory reporting and audits of working conditions. So why is this an ethical issue? So why is the welfare of laborers and child laborers an ethical issue at all? It's unethical to knowingly pervade harm and to profit at the expense of someone else's welfare and living conditions, especially when there's potential physical and/or psychological harm. We all contribute to society in some way, and just because one line of work is deemed less desirable does not mean it should be compensated any less. Labor rights protect farmers and workers from capitalist interests, as well as providing basic welfare and safety. Consumers and enterprises are complicit in undesirable living conditions when they source from farms that do not fairly compensate workers, thus making this an ethical issue. I'd like to also talk a little bit about the tangible good and harm involved in both the problem and the solution that we presented. In terms of tangible harm from the problem, lack of adherence to labor standards and laws can lead to exploitations of workers and child labor. Harm includes unsafe work conditions and lack of living wage. Child laborers are frequently denied a fundamental human right, the right to education. They're often forced to perform tasks in dangerous working conditions, work excessive hours, and have a lack of mandatory leave. The good from the problem may include profit maximization and lower prices for the consumer. The solution that we presented, which is audits and reporting requirements, might include retribution against workers that speak out about working conditions, loss of jobs and work from farms that are unable to meet these audit standards, undermining of local governments, and in places where children's earnings are a crucial family resource and schooling may be unavailable, the family may be missing out on a large income source. But under our solution, where living wage is enough to thrive on, these children wouldn't need to work. That transitions us into the tangible good from our solution. Having a living wage can support the families better and provide safer conditions for workers. Children's ability for education could lead to better family planning and mobility in the future. Being able to plan with a livable wage will make a very big difference in these families. We see this mix of good and harm in other industries as well. So an example from the clothing industry would be, for example, the US accuses another country of employing underage children in its apparel industry. This violation causes the country's workers to lose their jobs, drives up the supply of unemployed workers, increases prices charged to customers. And maybe even in the US, apparel workers lose wages and jobs due to downsizing of the company. But these losses are counterbalanced by gains to the US customers who previously bought clothing a lot more cheaply because of child labor and or lack of labor rights in the offending country.
I'd like to now talk about whether the problem and solution are ethically defensible in terms of our case. Now, labor rights within the cacao industry at present are ethically indefensible so long as corporations directly benefit from the exploitation of others. While there are challenges posed in tracing cocoa beans back to the source in order to pay a livable wage, it's not impossible, as other companies have shown. In fact, some chocolatiers have proved that it is not only possible to pay a living wage to workers, but to be able to pay a premium above that and remain competitive in the market, earning a substantial share of the market. Now, As part of the UN, countries of interest like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Cameroon must sign up to universal labor standards set forth by the International Labor Organization. However, there are huge variations in compliance and enforcement within these countries, and their labor output directly impacts our businesses. While we cannot impose laws on other countries, we can indirectly motivate them to impose stricter labor standards. The EU can help spur economic development for businesses in countries it conducts business with. When labor rates with these suppliers increases, other suppliers and farms will be encouraged to raise wages by natural reaction, thereby raising wage standards overall. And for these reasons, our solution stands ethically defensible as it does not force change in foreign lands, but encourages a livable wage in order to stay in a competitive market.
Thanks, Erin. So next I want to address the question, is there a conflict of rights apparent in our solution? Well, first I want to address the rights of what I see as the three main groups in this context. One group is the workers, one is the enterprises or corporations selling chocolate, and one are the consumers. In our view, the rights of workers are the right to safe working conditions and a living wage. The rights of enterprises is more controversial, but many would say the right of enterprise is to a free market and to fair competition. And the rights of consumers are to have products that are safe to consume, to know the contents of the products they are consuming, and to have necessities readily available. Now, most of these rights, you may say, are protected by legislation. And in fact, workers are also protected by unions in some cases. However, the ruling class, or those in charge and owning corporations, have much more power than the workers. And there is not enough legislation to protect the workers. These workers are still at a huge disadvantage and do not make a living wage. This is where our recommendation and audit comes in, to enforce that these workers can thrive rather than survive. Now, back to, is there a conflict in these rights? Some may argue that the rights of corporations may conflict with the rights of workers if granting the full rights or full wages of workers does not enable fair competition. However, our solution addresses this conflict. All enterprises in our recommendation would be subject to our audit as proportional to their revenue. Granting the full living wage to workers would not disrupt competition because the measure would be applicable to all enterprises in the EU industry. Additionally, this audit addresses demand by consumers for ethically sourced chocolate. Overall, consumers have been demanding more transparency in their products and more reporting on the conditions of workers. So thus our audit would enable corporations to showcase these values. Additionally, there's a growing trend of corporations prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, brand perception, and values over being purely profit motivated, which suggests our solution is even more viable. One example of an enterprise who prioritizes values over profit is a chocolatier named Tony Chocolonely. This chocolatier is Dutch and pays a premium to where it sources its chocolate. So above the required price of the cacao beans, Tony Chocolonely pays a premium to ensure the workers get a fair wage. And this chocolate company also makes profits and also has a huge market share at 18% in its native country. So this shows that it is possible to pay a premium, to pay workers a living wage, and to still thrive as a corporation. This brings us to our final question. Is our solution ethically acceptable? We would argue yes, because overall, the good that would come from this solution vastly outweighs the harm. The level of harm that workers experience now is way greater than the level of harm that a small price increase may induce on a consumer. The amount of good that would affect these marginalized workers and their future generations greatly outweighs any harm on a corporation. It's morally right to protect those who are most marginalized. and to center their welfare. So we want to protect our workers, and we are asking you, EU Commission, what will you do to protect these workers and give consumers ethical choices? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the timing is really close, just about a minute, kind of there for you. So good job. You know, again, there's no Q&A or really comments, but I'm looking at your chocolate backgrounds and I'm getting hungry. So, you know, now I'm not even just hungry for chocolate. I got to make sure it's sustainable now. And the source, I need to know where it comes from now. So that's how effective I think your work is. So great job. And I hope you feel good about your work. I mentioned just one bit of feedback, just one, and I'll put this on my notes. So the transitions are important. And so when you're passing on the presentation, you want to do a slight brief introduction of the next person. So that's the only really sort of recommendation I would have in the future, is that smooth handoff from speaker to speaker. So that's it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well done.